the key to my family's lake cabin, a piece of old, soft brass, worn smooth by 3 generations of hands, slid into the lock just as it had 1,000 times before. It moved through the familiar landscape of pins and tumblers, but this time it stopped with a hard metallic finality, an eighth of an inch from home. It was a silent, immovable rejection from the place I considered my soul's anchor. I jiggled it, my initial confusion quickly souring into a cold, creeping dread. The lock had been changed. My mind raced through the rational possibilitizer handyman mix-up, a prank by a friend, but my gut knew better. I cupped my hands around my eyes and peered through the wavy, imperfect glass of the front window. The dread flash froze into pure, unadulterated disbelief that left me breathless. The living room, my living room, was not as I had left it. My grandfather's worn, cracked leather armchair, the one that held the faint, lingering scent of his pipe tobacco, was gone. In its place sat a hideous, black full-leather gaming chair, the kind designed to look like the seat of a race car. A massive 70-inch flat-screen television was crudely bolted to the rustic pine wall where a hand-carved mantelpiece used to display generations of family photos. And lounging in the middle of it all, bathed in the flickering blue light of a screen, a video game controller in his hands, and my favorite, sweat-stained fishing hat perched backward on his head, was a young man I had never seen before in my life. My first thought, a fleeting, primal one, was that I was being robbed, that I had stumbled upon a particularly brazen squatter. But then my eyes settled on a framed photo on the new, cheap-looking end table, next to a tower of empty energy drink cans. It was a picture of the young man on the screen, grinning vacantly, his arms slung around the smiling, imperious figure of our new next-door neighbor and HOA president, Amelia Vance. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a random robbery. This was a hostile, premeditated invasion. An occupation sanctioned and orchestrated by the very woman who had made the last 6 months of my life a living hell. She hadn't just crossed a line, she had annexed my entire world. My family's cabin, a modest but beautiful structure of local stone and dark cedar, had stood on the shores of Whisper Lake for 70 years. It was built by my grandfather on a 5-acre plot of land that was legally and historically separate from the new, sprawling Whispering Pines Golf Lake Club that had recently sprung up around it, consuming the old farms and woodlands with its voracious appetite for real estate. I am a licensed land surveyor by trade, a profession that has instilled in me a deep, almost religious reverence for the sacred, unyielding truth of a legally recorded boundary line. My property was a sovereign nation, and Amelia Vance, the self-appointed queen of the neighboring kingdom, had just staged a bloodless, yet brutal coup.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Kingdom had just staged a bloodless, yet brutal coup. From the moment she moved into the massive, sterile mansion next door, a house so large it seemed to bully the landscape into submission, she had treated my property less like a private residence and more like a badly managed public park, but she was destined to baignade. Improve. Her campaign of encroachment had been insidious, a slow, creeping annexation of my peace. It started with her landscapers repeatedly mowing 5 feet into my lawn, a subtle but clear redrawing of our shared border. When I politely pointed out the official iron survey stakes I had personally installed, she'd smiled a tight, condescending smile that didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Oh, dear," she'd said, her voice a silken weapon. "Those old, rusty things? Surely we can agree on a more aesthetically pleasing boundary, can't we? A straight line would be so much more harmonious." Then came her guests. Her house was a hub of constant social activity-loud, ostentatious parties that bled late into the night. Her visitors, emboldened by alcohol and their hostess's own sense of entitlement, began to treat my private dock as an overflow area. They would wander over to smoke, leaving their cigarette butts and champagne flutes behind. I once found a couple passed out in my hammock. My quiet complaints were met with that same icy smile. "Boys will be boys," she'd said, with a shrug that dismissed my concerns as trivial. Her official complaints, filed through the HOA which she controlled with an iron fist, were as constant as they were absurd. She filed a formal grievance against me for the unapproved and jarring colour of my cabin's front door, a door that had been the same welcoming forest green since 1952. She complained that the smoke from my chimney on cool autumn evenings was impeding the lake views of her members. Each complaint was a probe, a test of my boundaries, a way to see how much I would tolerate. The latest front in our Cold War had opened a month ago, a proposition so audacious it had left me speechless. Her son, a layabout in his mid-20s named Chad, who oozed apathy and cheap cologne, had recently moved back in with her after, from what I could gather, failing spectacularly at life. She had approached me by the property line, her expression one of grave seriousness, as if she were about to propose a treaty between nations. "Mr. Anderson," she'd begun, "my Chad is in a transitional period. He's an artist, a creative soul. He needs his own space to find himself, to blossom. Your cabin seems so rustic and terribly unused most of the year. I would be willing to offer you a nominal fee, say $500 a month, for him to stay there until he gets on his feet. Think of it as a community service, a way to foster the arts." I had stared at her, dumbfounded. "Amelia," I had said, my voice tight with a disbelief that bordered on vertigo, "you are asking to rent my family's home, a place filled with 70 years of my history, so your son can have a place to play video games and find himself." The answer is no. It will always be no. It is not for rent, and it is most certainly not a community asset. Her face had hardened into a mask of cold fury. "I see," she'd said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "You are not a community-minded person, Mr. Anderson. That is a very unfortunate reputation to have out here." Apparently, she had decided to proceed with her plan anyway, skipping the formality of my permission and proceeding directly to a hostile takeover. She hadn't just given him a key, she had changed the locks. She had given him my home. I walked around to the back of the cabin, my mind racing, a cold, hard anger beginning to solidify in my gut. The back door, a heavy oak plank my grandfather had installed himself, was also locked, the old, familiar iron knob replaced with a new, shiny brass one. I peered through the kitchen window. The room was a disaster zone of pizza boxes.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
Window. The room was a disaster zone of pizza boxes, greasy paper plates, and a veritable mountain of empty energy drink cans. My grandmother's antique pie safe, a cherished heirloom, was overflowing with bags of chips and boxes of stale cereal. He was living here, truly living here, nesting in the ruins of my memories. The rage that had been building inside me finally washed over me, cold and pure. This was a violation of a depth I could barely comprehend. They had not just trespassed, they had colonized my memories, my history, my sanctuary. They had shown a level of disrespect so profound it was almost sociopathic. I walked back to my truck, my hands trembling not with fear, but with an absolute, crystalline fury. A direct confrontation would be useless. It would lead to screaming, denial, and her calling the police to report me for harassing her precious, creative son. She had already demonstrated a complete disregard for property law and common decency. I needed a different kind of solution. I needed a response that was as quiet, as permanent, and as unarguable as a granite boundary marker. As a surveyor, my world is one of lines, of angles, of the legally defined shapes that separate mine from yours. I knew my property's deed and its history better than I knew my own face. I knew every inch of its boundaries. And I knew about the flagpole. My 5-acre plot was not a simple square. It was L-shaped. The main part of the L was the cabin and the woods that surrounded it. The smaller, thinner part of the L, the part most people forgot, was a 50-foot wide strip of land that ran from the edge of my main property all the way out to the main county road, a distance of nearly a quarter mile. It was the original access route to the cabin from the 1950, a long, narrow flagpole on the map, a legal guarantee that the property would never be landlocked. When the developers had built Whispering Pines, they had simply built their main, majestic entrance road right down the middle of it. They had tried to buy the flagpole strip from my grandfather for a fortune, but he had refused. It was, and remained, my private land. The HOA's lush, flower-lined median that every resident, every guest, every delivery truck used to enter and exit the community. It was my front lawn. For years, my family had allowed its use, a simple, unspoken act of good faith. But Amelia Vance and her son had just extinguished a century's worth of goodwill. I sat in my truck and pulled out my phone. I didn't call the police. Not yet. A simple trespassing charge was a slap on the wrist for a crime this profound. I needed a response that was more poetic, more permanent. I needed to speak to them in the only language they understood, the language of access and exclusion. I called a local fencing contractor I knew well, a man named Henderson who had a reputation for working fast and asking few questions. "Henderson," I said, my voice steady and cold as ice. "It's Mark Anderson. I have a job for you, a big one. I'm going to send you the survey coordinates for a stretch of my property out at Whisper Lake. I need a fence, 8 feet high. Solid cedar privacy panels, Tunand groove. I want it installed tomorrow morning, and I want it done by sundown. Tomorrow?" "Mark, that's a hell of a rush job," he said. "I'll pay you double your usual rate," I replied. "And I need one more thing. I need a gate, a heavy-duty, commercial-grade automatic gate, installed right at the county road, spanning the full 50 feet. I'll be there in the morning with the official notarized survey maps to mark the exact line." A slow, dawning, and deeply satisfying smile was spreading across my face. Amelia Vance had stolen my cabin to give her son a place to live. I was about to steal her entire neighborhood's front door. The next morning, at the crack of dawn, the quiet serenity of Whispering Pines was shattered by the roar of diesel engines and the beep-beep-beep of a flatbed truck in, quote, reverse. Henderson's fencing crew, a team of grizzled, efficient professionals, was already at work. The truck, laden with massive stacks of fragrant cedar panels and heavy-duty posts, was parked at the very entrance to the development, right where the grand, landscaped boulevard met the county road. I was there, my surveyor's tripod set up, driving the first bright orange boundary stake into the ground with a heady mallet. The stake, as per the legal survey map I held in my hand, was planted squarely in the middle of the HOA's prize-winning multicolored petunia bed that spelled out a welcoming W. The work was a marvel of brutal efficiency. The crew, fueled by an industrial-sized thermos of coffee, a box of donuts, and my promise of a massive bonus for speed and precision, began digging post holes with a gas-powered auger. They were digging a perfectly straight, uncompromising line directly down the center of the wide, manicured median that served as the sole entrance and exit for the entire Whispering Pines community. My 50-foot-wide, legally owned flagpole of land was being reclaimed. It took less than an hour for the first signs of panic to appear. Residents in their BMWs and Teslas, on their way to work or the gym, were forced to navigate around the construction, their faces a mixture of confusion and annoyance. At 8:15 a.m., the Queen herself arrived. Amelia Vance's golf cart came screeching to a halt a few feet from my tripod, its tires leaving skid marks on the pristine asphalt. Her face, when she saw what was happening, was a spectacular canvas of apoplectic, uncomprehending rage. "Anderson!" she shrieked, her voice echoing in the morning air, a sound that made the construction crew pause their work for a moment. "What is this? What are you doing? You are destroying community property. This is vandalism." "Morning, Amelia," I said, offering her a cheerful, almost beatific smile. "I'm not destroying anything."
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
Most beatific smile. I'm not destroying anything. I'm improving my property, putting up a nice fence for a little more privacy. I have all the necessary county permits right here. I patted a folder resting on the hood of my truck. Your property, she sputtered, her voice trembling with fury. This is the median. This is the entrance to Whispering Pines. You've gone insane. According to the official county plat map, which I have right here in this folder, I said, tapping it again for emphasis. This 50-foot wide strip of land, from this county road all the way back to my cabin's main lot, is legally mine. It's designated as Parcel 4B on the county record. It has been since 1952. My family has been generous enough, for decades, to allow the community to use it for access. But after recent events, I've decided my property needs to be more secure. Her face went pale as she finally, truly understood the full, catastrophic implication of what she was seeing. Her jaw worked silently, but no sound came out. She had spent her entire tenure as president harassing me over imaginary infractions on my land, all while her entire community was, in fact, trespassing on a different part of it every single day just to get to Bumby, their homes. By noon, the fence was a solid 8-foot-high wall of cedar, stretching for a quarter of a mile down the center of their main road, creating a formidable and beautiful barrier. The crew was now installing the final piece of the puzzle, a heavy-duty, black iron gate across the 50-foot entrance right at the county road. It was a commercial-grade, automatic gate, the kind you see at secure industrial parks, operated by a keypad and a remote control. That's when Amelia finally found her voice again and did the one thing she knew how to do when her authority was challenged. She called the police. 2 sheriff's deputies arrived to a scene of controlled chaos. A long line of resident cars was now backed up onto the county road, unable to enter or leave the community. My crew was finishing the wiring on the gate's motor, and Amelia was standing in the middle of it all, screaming at me. This woman claims you've illegally blocked the only road into this development, sir, the senior deputy said to me, his expression weary, his hand resting on his belt. Not at all, officer, I replied calmly, not even looking at Amelia. I've simply fenced off my own private property. This 50-foot wide strip has always been the legal access route to my family's cabin. The PA. Developers of Whispering Pines built their road around my land. My family has allowed access for years as a simple courtesy. As of this morning, that courtesy has been withdrawn. I handed him the folder containing the certified survey, the original deed with its clear metes and bounds description, and my county-issued permit for the fence and gate. The deputy studied the documents for a long time. He walked the length of the new fence, his eyes on the bright orange survey stakes that were still visible at the base of the posts. He came back, his face grim. He had seen enough. He turned to Amelia. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat and official. "According to these official records, this is his land. The fence is legally permitted. He hasn't broken any laws." But we live here," a resident yelled from the window of his cont. "Mercedes, how are we supposed to get to our homes? This is insane." The deputy looked at me. I looked at the crowd of angry, entitled faces, then at Amelia, whose expression was one of utter, crumbling defeat. It was time to end this. It was time to state my terms. "The gate will have an access code," I announced, my voice carrying over the murmuring, frustrated crowd. "And I am willing to grant that access code to the residents of this community. But first, there are some non-negotiable conditions." All eyes were on me. I had them. For the first time, I held all the cards.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
For the first time, I held all the cards. "Condition 1, I said, looking directly at Amelia, my voice cold as stone. your son Chad, will vacate my cabin immediately. The new locks you installed will be removed, and my original locks will be reinstalled by a professional locksmith, at your expense. A certified check for $10,000 for damages, unauthorized use, and emotional distress will be delivered to my hands before this gate opens for a single car. Amelia's face went white as a sheet. Condition 2, I continued, my voice unwavering. The Whispering Pines Homeowners Association will issue a formal, written apology to me for the months of harassment and illegal trespass, and they will formally record a new covenant with the county, acknowledging the sovereign status of my entire property, exempting it from all past, present, and future bylaws, forever. I paused, letting my terms sink into the stunned silence. And condition 3, I said, my voice dropping slightly, making it all the more powerful. Amelia Vance will resign as president of the Homeowners Association, effective immediately. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Amelia looked as if I had physically struck her. But she was trapped. Her residents, who were now facing the prospect of being permanently locked out of their own million-dollar homes, were staring at her, their expressions turning from confusion to cold, hard fury. They didn't care about her pride. They cared about their driveways. She had picked this fight, and now they were all paying the price. You have 1 hour to comply, I said. After that, my offer of access is withdrawn permanently, and you can all take it up with the County Planning Commission, which I assure you will be a very long, very public, and very expensive process for all of you. It didn't even take an hour. It took 45 minutes of frantic phone calls, panicked shouting, and a level of groveling I had never before witnessed. A terrified-looking HOA treasurer ran to the bank. A tearful, humiliated Amelia scribbled her resignation on the hood of a resident's car. And a pale, sullen-looking Chad was unceremoniously evicted from my cabin, his gaming console tucked under his arm as he walked past the line of waiting cars, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. I stood by the newly installed gate keypad as the treasurer handed me the check. I typed in the 4-digit access code and gave it to him on a slip of paper. Distribute this to the residents, I said, and make sure they understand that this access is a privilege, not a right. It can be revoked at any time, for any reason. As the gate slid open with a quiet, hydraulic hiss and the long line of cars began to move, I walked back toward my cabin. The fence stood tall and proud, a beautiful, fragrant wall that was both a boundary and a statement. It was a monument to the simple, powerful idea that courtesy is a two-way street. And when that street is closed, sometimes you have to build your own.